We gather together to ask the Lord's blessing. He chastens and hastens his will to make known. The wicked oppressing now cease from distressing. Sing praises to his name. He forgets not his own. We Gather Together is a favorite hymn that is sung in congregations around Thanksgiving. It originated in the Netherlands and was brought over to the United States and translated into English in the late 1800s. Welcome, my friends, to Old Stonewall Farm as you join me in preparing for the Thanksgiving feast, which begins by taking down some of the pink popping corn that I grew in my garden this year. It has dried for the past few months now, and I'm taking the kernels because there's a legend that goes on the very first Thanksgiving, the Pilgrims placed 5 kernels at their plates settings in which to remind them to give thanks to God for 5 things in their lives. I like that tradition. I used to do it with the children at the churches that I served in. A reminder to count our blessings. Thanksgiving wouldn't be Thanksgiving without talking about the Pilgrims. And let's begin with what they wore. Yes, I'm embarking on a new project to make a 17th century jacket that I saw in a picture at a museum. I found replica material from a company in Sweden, but now I have to embroider it as it was done back in the 1600s. It is a myth that the Pilgrims dressed in drab black clothing. In fact, their clothing was quite colorful, ornate, and vibrant. I just love delving into the archives of history and discovering the things that we get wrong sometimes. Like perhaps pumpkin pie. Pumpkin pie was never the custard kind of pie that we have today, but rather there were many different variations. I happened to discover a new recipe, well, a new old recipe, dating back to 1670, in which the pumpkin was sliced, along with apples and mixed together with currants and raisins. The recipe is quite interesting when you take a look at it. That's because the pumpkin slices were first fried in butter and herbs like sage and thyme. I wasn't quite sure how this pie was going to come out with the combination of the herbs and then the sweetness from the raisins, but I was willing to give it a try. Another 17th century pumpkin pie recipe was one that I did a few years ago, in which you take a pumpkin and you hollow it out and you fill it with a mixture of eggs and molasses and brown sugar. And then you bake it right into the fire, either in a Dutch oven or in the actual coals of a fire. Have you ever stopped to think what the word pilgrim really means? To our ears, when we hear pilgrim, we automatically think of those men and women who landed on Plymouth Rock. But the word pilgrim can apply to all of us. For a pilgrim is someone who is on a journey to get to something better, to reach a goal, carrying only the essentials and striving daily to set aside all the weariness and fear and uncertainty. Being a pilgrim means setting out each day, beginning anew, and knowing that no matter how tiring or difficult the journey gets, that there's always grace, there's always love, there's always hope. You are a pilgrim on a journey. And on this Thanksgiving, I am happy to share with you a piece of pumpkin pie with a fellow traveler. So pull up a chair and join me here in Vermont for a Thanksgiving time together. Well, welcome to this special edition of Old Stonewall Farm. I say it's a special edition because I know many of you are probably busy already with Thanksgiving preparations or family that are gathering. And my husband even asked me, why am I doing this video now when so many people are going to be busy and probably not watching Old Stonewall Farm? But it was on my mind to do this because while many people are gathering together at the table, there are still many people who might be alone this day, either truly physically alone or perhaps feeling lonely even amid a crowd. That can happen as well. But why I wanted to join you today this year is because I often think about the celebration of the Lord's Supper or the Eucharist or Holy Communion, whatever you might call it, the breaking of the bread and the pouring of the wine or the juice, when we are reminded that we are fed at the table all together. And for me, what I think about the statement that I make when I invite people to come and take the bread and the cup, I always say that this is a table of grace, a table where we all gather together. It's a table that we're reminded once again that Jesus broke bread with the enemy, with the person he did not like. He broke bread with the stranger. And so I was thinking a lot about Thanksgiving gatherings and how many times is the table not as festive as we hope it to be. Either there's an empty chair, as I mentioned in my last video, or perhaps you are having a time alone, or perhaps you're feeling isolated, or maybe you just want to turn your back on the world and you have chosen to just spend it in quiet. But I wanted to share this Thanksgiving with you in case you were feeling a little bit out of sorts, because I've been there many times. When I was living in Manhattan, I don't know what demons I was battling that one Thanksgiving, but I decided to spend it alone. And I didn't have much money. I was living in a studio apartment. I watched the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade on TV. I didn't venture out into the crowds. But then later on, I didn't have anything in my cupboards or my refrigerator. I went to the grocery store. It was opened. And I bought this package of gingerbread mix. And all I needed was to mix it with water and to bake it in my tiny little oven in my studio. And so I made my gingerbread and I decided to set it out on a plate that I had and light one candle that I had. And that was my Thanksgiving meal by myself. Now, I had the office camera still in my apartment. I was working for a magazine, and many times the reporter would have to take a camera to take pictures of the event. So I had the camera there, and I decided, oh, I have some film left. I'm going to take a picture of my gingerbread, my one little place setting, and my candle. So I did. Well, I didn't even think about it, but I handed in the camera to my editor, and she proceeded to get the film developed to go with the story that I was writing. And I had forgotten that I took a picture of my quiet Thanksgiving meal of gingerbread. She proceeded to call me into her office, and she showed me the picture, and she said, "This is very sad." And that really took me by surprise because while it was perhaps a little bit sad, I didn't see it that way. I simply saw it as a holy moment, and it's what I needed at that moment. Yes, the world might say that's pretty sad, but It's what my soul needed. I'm always telling you, my dear friends, that there's no set ways in the world that this is how things have to be. Sometimes there are seasons where we spend time alone, and it doesn't necessarily have to be sad. In fact, perhaps it can be healing, and perhaps we need that moment just to take a big sigh and shed a tear. So that is why I wanted you to come and spend a little bit of Thanksgiving with me here at Old Stonewall Farm, for me to just share with you the things that I've been working on, the projects, and to get a taste of that pumpkin pie recipe from 1670. It is so delicious. Oh my goodness, I'm really surprised. But I wanted to come to you just in case, perhaps, that you are not with family right now. Or maybe you just came home from family and you just need to be alone. Or maybe you're just needing a moment of grace, a moment to light a candle and just be. And so I wanted to provide you with a place at my table where you can be who you are and you can feel whatever you are feeling this Thanksgiving or any day. So I'm offering you those 5 kernels of corn that I shared with you. And I want you to sit down with me at the Thanksgiving table. And let's find 5 things that we are grateful for. Come. The first kernel reminds us that God loves us. The second kernel reminds us that God provides for all our needs. The third kernel reminds us of the friends that God has given us. The fourth kernel reminds us of all the people God has given us who love us. And the fifth kernel reminds us that God hears our prayers and answers us.